This Week in Parasitism is brought to you by the American Society for Microbiology at microbeworld.org/TWiP. This Week in Parasitism, episode number 57, recorded on July 17th, 2013. Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and I'm joined by Dickson Despommier.
Good afternoon, Vincent.
How are you, Dickson?
I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
A bit warm out, isn't it?
A little. As you would say colloquially, you think.
Do I say that?
You do. Sometimes you do say that.
I mean, there's something associated with me, actually?
There is. There's a pattern to your speech that I've come to accept and enjoy listening to.
Do you think it's a New Jersey thing?
It might. You think?
36 degrees Celsius.
Oi. And the humidity?
That's like 96, 97, right?
It is.
Humidity is 38%, which is not very high.
It feels like a lot more than that.
Pretty warm out. This is New York City, of course. We come to you from New York City.
Upper Manhattan.
168 to be exact.
That's right. On the 13th floor of a building.
But the past week we've had a heat wave, right?
Yeah.
Would you say?
That's right. But as you know, I just got back from a place that
Martha and the Vandellas. Oh, you were where it's even hotter than
I was
here.
in Singapore. And Singapore, it was 90 degrees Fahrenheit and about 80% humidity because it's 1 degree above the equator. And it was really oppressive. I had never experienced that intense combination before because I've been close to the equator. I've actually been to Kenya once, but it's a dry heat.
So this is a degree north of the equator?
1 degree north.
So the toilet's flush to the right?
I didn't actually look. I should have looked, because the Coriolis effect is zero. At the equator, people shouldn't flush their toilets because they won't go anywhere.
It doesn't swirl at all.
It just goes straight and make me down the hole.
You should have looked. Dixon, this was your
stupid.
opportunity.
I blew it. I'll have to go back. I'll definitely
Well, we have
to go
listeners
back.
from New Zealand and Australia. They could tell us if it goes the other way.
But there was, it's interesting you should mention that because there was an art structure called the oculus.
Yes.
I bet you if you went online you could find it. It's called the oculus.
The Oculus.
Oculus.
Singapore.
Yeah, and when it rains, it collects rainwater. And the rainwater does flow out in a certain direction. It actually showed it working. And that might have answered the question.
Yeah, Rain Oculus. It's a shopping area.
Right, but it has a collector at the top that actually has rainwater.
There's a YouTube video.
Right, so it's 1 degree above the equator. The Coriolis effect still is
You can see it here, Dick.
holding up.
Does that look familiar?
It looks very familiar, in fact, although
That's you over there, isn't it?
I made another mistake of no, not really. I should have gone to it, but I didn't, of course.
Shoulda. Always regrets.
No, but I went to some places, though. I did go to their... I went to the botanical gardens.
What's the function of this? Just
I guess
a fountain?
It's a piece of art.
Oh, the water is going to the right. It's going to... Wait a minute. No, this way is counterclockwise.
It should go counterclockwise.
But it's north of the equator.
That's right.
Here it goes clockwise, doesn't it?
No. North of the equator, it goes counterclockwise. South of the equator, it goes clockwise.
All right, I'm going to put this in the show notes. How's that?
Great.
For complexity.
Sure.
The Oculus.
The Oculus, yeah.
Of Singapore.
It's, a feature of one of their shopping centers. It's like a water feature, they call it.
Did you go shopping there?
I did.
At the shopping center?
No, I didn't do that.
So I hear that you heard in Singapore that the vertical farm is the thing of the future.
Well, if I say this, it sounds self-serving, but...
I gave you a lead-in, didn't I?
You did. I was there
We should do a radio show. We'd be good together.
We need to have more jokes. I'm sorry.
Look at all that stuff on the table there. What is that?
I disenfranchised myself of the stuff that clinks around in my pockets.
I'm going to take a picture so everyone can see the what we got here. Maybe I'll even go farther back.
So you can get a total collection of my collection habits of... it's just my watch.
You got
and my
car keys,
USB
chain,
right?
your ID,
and my wallet.
in
So,
your wallet.
I like to podcast unencumbered.
Okay. Well, that's because I yelled at you once for
See, I listen.
making noise.
I listen.
I don't know why you listen to me. My kids don't.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of going to work. Once you get to work and the students are there, they have to listen.
They don't either.
They don't either?
No, they don't have to. They can be critical and independent, right?
Yeah.
But if I say, put the box here, they have to listen to that.
They do.
They don't.
Because you pay them to, you're sort of like their sugar daddy.
There are a lot of things they should do. When it comes to experiments, I think it's fine to question, but you know what? If it doesn't work, you have to do it my way.
Or the right way.
What is it? There's the right way, the wrong way, my way, and the Navy way. Do you know what movie that's from? The King Mutiny with Humphrey Bogart.
I was going to say something
I'm
else.
sorry, folks. We have digressed.
Boy, have we.
Should we start over?
No, of course not.
Anyway, Singapore, you were feted. They said Dickson invented the vertical farm, and we're all grateful. This is the future of agriculture, right? That was basically it, so you don't have to say it yourself.
Well, that's what most people said. But they were pandering to the judges.
Dickson was very excited.
Sure, who wouldn't be? 10 universities gathered for competition. 2 teams from each university from such august places as UC Berkeley and Delft University in Holland and Zurich University of Zurich in Switzerland, and lots of other nice places. And they all presented their version of a 1 square kilometer, 100,000 person city that had to have included inside of it some form of agriculture, and they all picked vertical farming as their form. So that was really quite good. I liked it, of course.
And now you're back to New York City.
Right.
What's your next trip?
My next trip is to Rochester in September.
Minnesota or New York?
New York.
I was there last summer at this time.
It's hot up there, too.
Very hot. We visited RIT and UR.
Yeah, I've been to RIT. That's a good place. No, this is some ecological sustainability conference. I'll know more about it when the time approaches. I try not to think about these things until
that's in July or August?
September.
That's pretty. So you're going to be here until then? I don't believe you.
I will be. I just promise.
You're not going anywhere?
I don't have any more trips.
You're going fishing, right?
I might.
Like yesterday. How was the fishing yesterday?
It was actually pretty good.
The fish don't care about the heat?
They do eventually, but yesterday the heat didn't approach the temperatures that we have here because it was in the mountains.
No, you said you were going to fish naked. Is that right?
Not naked, no.
That would have been so gross.
It's called wading wet. You leave off your waders.
Did you?
Yeah. It was fun.
It was refreshing?
Very.
As you walk through, do you feel the different temperatures?
Can
you sense that?
You can, and you also feel the push of the current and all kinds of other things.
Did you catch anything?
I did.
What?
Trout.
It's always the same thing, right?
Not always. Sometimes I don't catch anything.
Did it have whirling disease?
Not this. Nope. I haven't caught a fish with whirling disease in years.
Okay.
Really.
But you have caught them in, not to go back to last week's episode, but you did catch them in Pennsylvania previously? Was it somewhere
Not with
else?
whirling disease. Out in Montana, I caught a few fish that had evidence of whirling disease, yeah.
Okay.
So we're not talking about whirling disease this time.
No, we did last week.
We did. That's right. But we're talking about something completely different this time.
This actually, you emailed me while you were in Singapore.
I did.
You said we should do this next.
Right. So what did I email you?
There's an outbreak of Cyclosporiasis.
Yes.
Is that how to say it?
It is.
Caused by
Cyclospora Caiatinensis.
Cyclospora Caiatinensis.
Correct.
And that is spelled C-A-Y-E, like cayenne pepper.
Yeah.
Tanensis.
Right.
And we have not discussed this particular organism.
We have not. We've discussed relatives of this parasite, but not this particular.
Who would be... Now, is this a protozoan?
It is.
Single-celled?
Correct. Eukaryotic.
Well, that's the kind of parasites we do here on TWiP,
Single
isn't it?
nucleated.
And only one kind of form?
No. There are many forms to this one.
But they're all single cells?
Yes.
Doesn't make any multicellular things. And who are the related organisms? Cryptococcus?
Toxoplasma.
Oh, they're all protozoans. Is that what you mean?
Plasmodium. No. They're even more related than just because they're protozoans.
So the protozoans are broader than...
Much broader than
Oh, this is in your book under protozoans of minor medical importance.
That's true.
Although our listeners said that's fine.
We might have to elevate this one to major medical importance.
It's causing an outbreak, as we'll see.
Several outbreaks.
Oh, and in the same chapter, Balantidium coli, which...
No, that's not a related parasite, though. It's not a related parasite.
I'm sorry, Dickson. Entamoeba?
No.
You said malaria is related?
It is.
And what was the first one? Giardia?
No.
Toxo?
No. Yes. I did say toxo. That's
what else?
Correct. And Cryptosporidium. So with all those parasites that look all different...
Cryptosporidium is the one you get from sheep.
Yeah, or cattle. And what do they all have in common? What does that group have in common?
Apicomplexa.
Yes!
The reason I knew that was because of malaria.
Vincent, you are...
No.
Yes, you are. You're one of us now.
I'm not.
He refuses to join us.
I'm from outer space.
That's true, but so are the rest of us. We came here transported by comets.
What is an apicomplexan?
They have to be characterized by their genetics and by their structural biology.
Okay.
So
the genetics is some sequence that makes it an AP.
Correct. They can be related by, I think they can be related by their ribosomal RNAs. But the most relative structure that is...
Relevant.
I meant to say relevant. Structure that we can talk about is the front end of the parasite.
Wow, there's a front and a back end?
Yes, and the apicomplexal... and the apicomplexa have, at their apical ends, right, little ducts that allow the rope trees and micronemes to actually go out and attach to the host and secrete an attachment factor, as in the case with toxoplasma. Remember, it secretes its own receptor.
Right, I remember that. So that makes it, and that structure is the AP complex.
Yeah, and remember it was called Spit and Kiss, or Spit and Kiss.
That was the name of the episode?
By John Boothroyd, yeah, that's right. In fact, he was our guest.
Actually, it was different, but he was our guest.
Yeah, he wrote a paper called Kiss and Spit. So all these parasites have that in common. That's the way. That's the way malaria enters a red cell, although it's much more complicated than just spitting and kissing. And Cyclospora and Cryptosporidium are intestinal versions of the apicomplexal parasites.
All right.
Complexan.
Now,
I said complexal. I didn't mean that. Complexly.
Life cycle.
The life cycle is... No, because it's very similar to the one of Cryptosporidium, so we didn't put it in because it was considered almost identical in terms of its life stages. So if you look at Cryptosporidium life cycle...
Is that in the same chapter?
Well, no, it's not in the same chapter. It's back wherever we were discussing the apicomplexa.
Toxo.
Keep going. A little more.
Now, that was ages ago, wasn't it?
Yes, it seemed like... doesn't seem like just yesterday.
We might do toxo again if something is developed, right?
This is true.
Okay, the reservoir hosts look here to be young cows and young goats.
That's true. So unlike Cryptosporidium.
That's crypto, yeah.
Cyclospora apparently only has a single host.
And that is humans.
Yes. But every species of mammal might have its own Cyclospora.
And they don't cross over. Right?
They don't. Pause the tape.
Are you going to cough again? You want to make more work for me? I left it in last time so people could hear how you torture me.
That was not a nice thing to do, Vincent.
What? Leave it in?
Leave it in. You shouldn't do that.
I didn't leave the actual cough in.
It's a human thing. I can't help it. Okay, it's just
the
way.
You're making me feel bad.
Yeah, well, you've made me feel. You've humiliated me in front of millions of.
You have steel skin. Come on, you told me nothing bothers you except getting the biochemistry wrong.
This is all true.
So every animal has its own cyclospora.
That's what they think now. They think
there's no evidence so far of crossing over into people.
There isn't, because otherwise there'd be more outbreaks in people from cyclospora, but there haven't been more outbreaks of cyclospora.
Right.
They've all been traceable back to a single point source.
Okay.
That's interesting.
And we'll get to that
we will.
when we talk about this outbreak. But I want to do this infectious cycle.
Sure.
Or not infectious cycle. It's a reproductive cycle.
That's right. It's how you acquire the infection.
So could we modify this picture to put people up here at the upper right?
No, there's no reservoir.
People are the reservoir.
No, it's not a reservoir. They are the only host. You can't call them reservoirs.
Can't call them reservoirs?
No, I'm sorry.
But it has to exist in people forever.
If you want to call anything a reservoir, you might call soil the reservoir, because the spore can last in soil for a long time.
So is this a global thing, this
It is.
cyclospora? It's in every country?
Apparently.
So you release the sporozoites in your feces, I presume. That's sort of the tail end of the cycle, I guess.
Let's start with the spore being ingested.
All right, so you ingest a spore.
You ingest the spore.
It says here an oocyst is being ingested, but that's basically a spore, right?
Same deal, right.
And this oocyst came from the environment or food or something, probably.
From the feces of an infected person.
All right. But you said it was in the soil.
Well, sometimes we do defecate.
Could you pick it up in the soil?
If the soil contaminates something we eat, yes.
Oh, farms, of course.
Or drink.
So let's say a farm worker defecates near the rice, not rice, or melons or something.
Right. Like cantaloupes.
Right. Okay, and then that contaminates it. And so you ingest the oocyst, and then what happens? It goes through your stomach?
Yes.
It must be resistant to stomach acids.
It is.
Proteases.
But then it's digested away by the small intestinal proteases.
All right.
Releasing the sporozoites.
Sporozoites, got it. And those are these little guys. They attach to the surface of the epithelium?
They do.
Right.
They penetrate into the epithelium.
Oh, my gosh.
Using their apical ends and their micronemes and
rope trees.
And rope trees.
And they get intracellular?
They do.
Oh, they go within the cell.
They do.
And what happens?
Well, I think they're claiming, that is, the literature claims, that the same thing happens with Cryptosporidium. It's a Coccidian parasite. Okay, Coccidia are the group that the Cyclospora belong to. So coccidial parasites are widely distributed and well known, especially among commercial poultry manufacturers like Frank Perdue and those kinds of people.
Right.
They've struggled with these infections in barnyard situations ever since there have been commercial production centers. Because Coccidian parasites can reduce the growth rate and actually kill off fowl. So some drug companies, let's name just one, Merck, for instance, has invested a lot of research into anti-coccidial microbial agents so that they can try to keep down the epidemics of coccidiosis. And rabbits, it's an important pathogen of rabbits as well. And immunocompromised patients, okay? Because some coccidial parasites, like Isospora, this is another one of those rare occurring coccidial parasites of humans that only occurs in immunosuppressed patients. But nonetheless...
These are coccidio.
Yes, they're all Coccidian parasites.
Cyclospora.
No, Cyclospora is a Coccidian parasite.
Right.
But they're a subgroup of the apical.
It's not coccidiosis.
Right.
So once this sporozoite gets into your intestinal epithelial cell, what does it do there?
Well, then it invades the cell. It's an intracellular parasite. So it gets inside the cell and it begins to differentiate into stages. Which
is there a sexual
There is.
part?
There is. These are all haploid organisms at this point. And so they differentiate into male and female equivalents. Gametocytes, as they're called, for the whole group, just like malaria and even toxo. And then they fuse and form a zygote.
This is all in the intestine, right?
Well, the fusion in the zygote, it occurs in its passage out with the feces. Because then it starts to encyst, and it makes this nice environmentally resistant cyst, and out into the environment it goes.
So it doesn't get into your circulation, doesn't spread to other organs?
Nope. It stays.
And what are the symptoms of this infection?
Just like Cryptosporidium, it induces an incredible diarrheal disease.
Diarrhea. Oops, sorry, I hit my microphone.
Oh, you'll have to correct that,
I'm
Vince.
I'll leave it in to show everyone how clumsy I am.
No.
Diarrheal disease, cramps, dehydration could be a problem, right?
That's correct, but, especially in young and old people.
Why is that? Because their immune systems aren't
No,
good?
because they dehydrate rapidly and they suffer greatly from the effects of dehydration.
All right.
And electrolyte imbalance, too, I must say, that accompanies the dehydration event.
Now, according to your book...
Yes. Here's why I eat my own words.
Don't say that.
I haven't looked at this in a while.
This is an old book, right?
It is an old book. It's back 2005, but I don't think we have much.
Following infection, watery diarrhea
That's right.
results in a week or two. depending on how many oocytes.
A week or two. Now, that's important to note because some invasive organisms, like rotavirus, you're speaking now from a virology standpoint, Vincent. Tell me what the delay time is between encountering rotavirus and suffering from rotavirus.
Yeah, it's a couple of days.
So that's the incubation period is what, 2 days?
Yeah.
Okay.
Much shorter
So
than
this is a
one.
week.
Yeah.
Which complicates trying to find out where it came from.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so symptoms can last up to 2 weeks.
They can. And in immunocompromised patients, they can last much longer.
Yes, it says here if you have HIV/AIDS.
That's right.
Can go longer. Nausea, vomiting, anorexia, weight loss,
Right.
and abdominal cramping.
Right.
Frequent symptoms.
By the way, the listeners should know that at least I went back and read that part before we started this podcast. So
You're supposed to know this anyway.
Well, I can't remember every word, but
How would you diagnose this? Have you ever in your career diagnosed this, Dickson?
no, I have never seen a case of cyclosporiasis. Never have. But it's a stool examination that you're looking for, and you're looking for the oocyst, and it's big. It's not little, it's big.
I have a picture here in the book.
Yeah, it's huge.
Maybe we'll put this in the show notes.
I got that one from Miguel Guelpi, who was our crack ace parasitology diagnostic technician.
It says here the infection, Cyclospora, was virtually unknown 15 years ago. That's when this book was written, which was...
So that's 1995. We never knew about this before 1995.
It has since emerged as an important health risk in some populations, particularly in tropical regions of Peru, Brazil, and Haiti, where it's considered endemic, especially in AIDS population.
Right.
And it says here that epidemics are seasonal.
Yep.
Why would that be?
Well, because it's associated with growing things.
And it occurs sometimes during periods of drought. Why would that be, Dickson?
I have no guess at that one. No, it's a mystery disease, basically. It's got a low profile, first of all, and it doesn't infect too many people. So therefore, it doesn't attract the attention of the top echelon for EIS officers, for instance, from CDC.
Can it kill you?
I don't know of anyone who's ever been reported to die from cyclosporiasis, whereas with cryptosporidium, it has a much more long, protracted diarrheal disease, and I know people with AIDS do die from it, if untreated.
It says here several outbreaks in the U.S. have been caused by ingestion of fecally contaminated raspberries.
Correct.
Okay. The life cycle, little is known about the details,
and by the way,
the role of reservoir hosts in maintaining infection in the environment.
Yeah, but the latest from the CDC, if you go to their website and read what they have to say about it, they are convinced now that
there's no reservoir hosts.
There aren't, because otherwise there'd be more outbreaks.
They say that similar parasites have been isolated from dogs.
Similar parasites.
And non-human primates.
That's right, but apparently they're host-specific.
Final question. Well, not the final question. But the other question, how do you treat this? Do you treat it?
You do, and it's treated with Bactrim. So,
Bactrim.
Trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole is the... those are hard to say, but trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole are the two antibiotics that actually work.
Would you
Whereas they
actually
don't,
treat it? Or?
Yeah, you could. I mean, if you were an elderly patient or a young child that had more than a week's worth of diarrhea, you'd probably try to get rid of it this way.
So if someone came here with, gastroenteritis and was diagnosed by a fecal smear with cyclosporiasis, do you think they'd give them mebendazole?
They wouldn't give them mebendazole. No, they would give them
Bactrim.
Bactrim.
I just want to see if you were listening because you kind of look sleepy.
I'm not sleepy.
I'm just kidding.
Vincent, I've recovered from my jet lag from Singapore, but...
you looked remarkably good.
Well, for a man my age, you mean.
All right, now, let's turn to the videotape. There have been 3 posts at ProMed Mail.
Right.
First one on July 4th, which here in the U.S. is the anniversary of our liberation from the Brits.
Correct. You'd say that. That's right.
Thank goodness I don't have a British accent, right?
That's right.
7 cases of cyclosporiasis have been reported in 3 states, including Iowa and Nebraska.
That's right. And Wisconsin.
And it says, health officials are reminding you to wash your fruits and vegetables after an outbreak of this sort.
Well, wait a minute. Let me ask the listeners this, then. How many people who buy raspberries in these little delicate plastic perforated cartons actually wash their raspberries?
I do.
If you wash raspberries, Vincent, they're delicate.
I know. You have to eat them right away. They'll get moldy.
They'll get mushy. They'll get
That's true. You can't wash them all at once.
No, but people usually just throw them on their cereal.
No, I wash only what I'm going to put on my cereal. This morning I had blueberries and I washed them.
Right.
I have a friend, though, who immerses them in a bucket of water and then puts soap in it and actually washes them. And I said, why are you doing this? She says, what good is it to rinse them with water? You're not going to get anything. I said, what if rats have been walking over them in the warehouse? Wow. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean,
with rinsing it, I do a cursory rinse with water just to satisfy the hand sanitation.
I know that biofilms are not penetrable by just washing
I don't know if Cyclospora makes a biofilm.
Makes you feel better. Go ahead and do it. But there are so many interstices on a berry that it would be difficult to imagine how you could wash it out from those interstices where those little berry seeds stick.
So that's all they had in this first post. They say officials want to get the word out as quickly as possible with the holiday weekend coming up.
Right.
So people are going to have fruit, right, and they should wash it. And it says the illness is not contagious and is easily treated with an antibiotic. Contagious meaning spreading person to person, but it is contagious, isn't it?
Well, you can't get it by shaking their hand unless, of course, they forgot to wash their hands before they came back out of the...
I wouldn't say it's not contagious.
I wouldn't either. No, of course not.
All right, the next post was on July 12th, which is 8 days later.
8 days
Can you imagine that math that I just did?
Oof, pretty good.
Confirmed cases of a rare foodborne illness have doubled in Iowa over the past 4 days.
By the way, that reminded me of a joke, which I will now tell you. I learned this one from Dr. Michael Katz, who was one of my all-time great mentors while I was here at Columbia. He told the following story. It relates just to your math story here. It's a kindergarten.
Okay.
And the teacher says to the class, how much is 2 plus 2? And one little kid in the back raises his hand, and she says, Johnny. And Johnny says, 4. And the teacher looks at Johnny and she says, that's pretty good, Johnny. And little Johnny says to the teacher, no, that's not pretty good. That's perfect.
Nice.
Right.
Precocious.
I guess.
So there were 45, as of July 12th, 45 Iowans had been sickened.
45 Iowans. Buckeye. No, they're not Buckeyes. They are Hawkeyes.
And they didn't know what the source is for sure, but the things are pointing more toward a vegetable than a fruit. That's what they said.
Yeah, but, they haven't pinned it down, have they?
Not in the second one. We'll see. But they say the illness is most commonly contracted by eating food or drinking water contaminated with human or animal feces. Animal feces? No.
I think it's wrong. I think that's
Could you get it from drinking contaminated water?
If it was contaminated with human feces that had the oocyst in them, of course you could. You betcha.
Since the parasite, it needs several days, sometimes weeks, to become infectious, it is not passed directly from person to person.
Well, you mean in order to sporulate once it's secreted out into the environment? Yes.
Symptoms, which we mentioned already, they're listed here. If untreated, it can cause frequent, sometimes explosive bowel movements that last an average of 57 days if untreated. That's bad. Diarrhea for 57 days.
That's awful.
You could get dehydrated.
This is true.
Most of the 45 Iowans became sick in mid to late June. So Dickson...
If they count backwards from that, then it was middle of June that they caught it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
And all the Nebraskans got ill in June as well.
Right.
Now, Dickson...
Yes.
What would you do with these individuals to find out what caused this? What would you do?
Well, I would think back to Jon Snow, actually. I would like to go back to the original outbreak of diarrheal disease, cholera in this case, and show something of the distribution of these people in relationship to the parasite that they caught. So I would like to know, A, where do these people live?
Would you interview them?
Sure. I mean, the EIS officers are going over.
Yeah, they'll go to them and go visit them and say,
of course they are. And there's
I
a huge
understand
questionnaire.
You had sick. Can you fill out this questionnaire?
I'm sure they did that. And they looked for common features among all of them. And I'm sure there aren't too many common features because everybody lives an individual life. But they may have all shopped at the same place. Or they may have all bought the same thing. And that's what they're looking for, some common feature. And they didn't find one.
So, they did all this. And
they did all of it and they didn't find it.
Wow.
Right. So there could be that. What does that imply, Vincent?
Multiple
Yes.
etiologies?
Could. Multiple sources for the same infection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it could indicate, I'm not saying it does, but it could indicate that it's not an imported disease from a single source of food, but maybe at a distribution center where lots of different foods are being put onto the shelves, maybe there's an individual responsible for contaminating multiple.
Now, this suggests to me, since it's limited to Iowa and Nebraska,
Yeah, if that was true, though,
that it's not a Costco-type place that
Yeah, well-
distributes all over the country, right?
that's a heck of an idea, because that's what I would be looking for in these reports. I would be looking for some shopping feature of these people's habits that I could relate to each other through an interrelated systemic map of the outbreak.
By the way, Nebraska and Iowa are neighboring states.
That they are.
I was in Nebraska last year. I didn't get Cyclospora.
No, I've actually driven through Nebraska, so I didn't have a chance to get.
Now, they say here the illness is rare in Iowa, typically 1 to 2 cases a year, and these are travelers. They get it while traveling.
That's different.
The illness is also rare in Nebraska. No cases in the last 4 years, and only 1 in 2007 and 2008.
So it can't be food handlers per se, because it does take some time for the spores to develop to infectivity once they leave the body. So that reminds you of some other parasites that we've discussed, like, for instance, Trichuris eggs, which when they're passed, they're not infectious, but in a week or two after they incubate in the soil, then they're infectious. And that same true is for Ascaris eggs, etc. So maybe we should have a little contest here and see if our listeners really are on the ball here, and they could supply us with a list of the parasites that we've covered on all of our podcasts.
How are you going to motivate them?
Well, I'm going to give them something, aren't I?
I know what you're going to give them.
I bet you do too.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later, right?
We will, but we've got a special prize for the winner of that contest. So the contest is to send us your list of parasites that we've talked about on TWiP, which the stages of which require an incubation in the soil before they become infectious.
All right, let me write that down. Send us your list of parasites that require incubation period in soil. Before what?
Before they become infectious.
And this is one of them here, Cyclospora.
It is.
All right.
And there are others.
A few more things here, Dickson. Outbreaks in recent years have been traced to blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, basil, arugula, vegetable-based salads, pasta salad, tuna salad, green beans, peas, and fruit salad. And,
so there's no pattern there.
No pattern.
But wait a minute.
It's stuff that can be contaminated by fecal material.
But
right?
they didn't say where the raspberries were from, and so at one point there was a pattern. In fact, in the early days of outbreaks caused by Cyclospora, the only 2 outbreaks that we could actually pinpoint the source of was in Honduras. And that came from it came from a specific region of Honduras.
Yeah, so raspberries are often imported, right?
But they're high bush berries. They're not down around the ground. So it wasn't contamination with human feces as you might find in a fertilizer.
The picker could pick it and have contaminated hands. But boy, they'd have to have an awful lot of fecal material on their hands.
Tell me about it.
Ah, that's ridiculous.
Well, if you think of what it's like to work on a farm in the tropics, miles away from a facility, you might develop some sensitivity for this, that you feel sorry for these people because they really are working under adverse conditions. And of course that passes it on to the consumer as well. So we haven't had an outbreak of that in recent years.
What do you mean by we?
That is the United States.
Okay.
But we don't inspect our food for it, by the way. Even in the state of Minnesota, that has one of the most rigorous food inspection systems of the world, they don't look for Cyclospora.
Is it a reportable disease, Dickson?
Well, it is now, because they only make it reportable when they want to learn more about the etiology and the biology of the infection. And so in this case, I think that CDC has given an alert out to its EIS network and also to physicians that are participating.
It is a reportable disease.
Sure, because...
Do you know how I figured that out?
Tell me.
The CDC just released its summary of notifiable diseases for 2011.
Okay.
And on this list is Cyclosporiasis And I can tell you in 2011, there were 151 cases in the United States.
I'll be darned.
The biggest numbers were in July and August. Look at that.
And in which states?
I have to go to the next chart.
Uh-huh.
This one's by month. This one is by geographic area.
Midwest, I bet.
Hold on. These are viruses here. I wrote a interesting summary of this. Well, maybe it's not so interesting. I shouldn't have said that. I'm scrolling down here. It's Coccidian Cyclosporiasis.
Right.
New England had 12.
Oh.
Mid-Atlantic 38, including 19 in New York City.
Probably travelers.
You think?
Yeah.
East, North, Central, only 7. Michigan, those were all in Michigan. West, North, Central, only 3. Ooh, South Atlantic, 69. 58 in Florida. Travelers? Old people.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
Elderly people.
Huh.
East, South, Central, only 2. West, South, Central, 15, 14 in Texas. It's pretty riveting, isn't this, Dickson?
Well, that's why
And 4 in the Pacific.
why we picked this.
So it is a notifiable disease. And I am going to link to the notifiable
Excellent.
disease summary in our show notes here.
That's a good one.
Every time we talk about something, we put it in the show notes. Now,
that's a good one.
an epidemiologist said because of the way the cases appeared, he said he thinks it's a foodborne item, but of course they haven't identified it yet.
Prove it.
Now, there was a third post.
See,
Where was that? Monday, July 15th.
right.
State officials have confirmed 15 more infections from a rare foodborne parasite.
It's not over with.
So 60 in Iowa. It's not over.
Nope. It's all ongoing.
Investigators believe tainted vegetables. Maybe that's the only common thing that some people had, right?
Well, you could think what you want, but if you don't do the test, you won't find out.
Tainted vegetables. So July 15th, which was 2 days ago,
Right.
still going on?
So we have to wait for their next report to see if this is stopped or is still going.
Should we keep the recorder going while we wait?
That makes for a very long podcast day.
So this is something that began in June
Right.
and here. Now, Dickson, if you cook your vegetables, will that get rid of it?
It will.
If you cook your peaches, will that get rid of it?
it doesn't get rid of it. It destroys the infectivity.
Yeah. Peaches you could cook if you were going to make something like a pie
Right.
or something. But most people, like I today, ate your peach just raw.
Exactly.
I just gave it a cursory rinsing.
And do you think that'll good enough to wash off the oocysts?
No, it wasn't. But,
It satisfies some inner need to sanitize. I
am
understand.
trusting the system, and I shouldn't. But
Well, you can see what happens. The system breaks down every
pretty
now
rare.
and then.
How many people are in the U.S., Dickson?
Let me read something I did copy off
Millions of
the CDC.
people, and only a few.
Listen to this one. It
Okay,
says
go ahead.
foodborne illnesses. This is on an annual basis. 48 million illnesses.
Yeah, that's a lot. But
Nine-
that's all sources, right?
Yeah, that's right. 9.1 million of those illnesses had an identifiable agent associated with them. That means if you subtract 10 from 48, that means 38 million people were infected with something that caused them to be sick, and they never found out what it was. No one ever did the test, so they didn't proceed. They didn't follow it up because they got better, and they said, I think with it. Right? But this is the part that I didn't get. In the same paragraph, it then said, reported 13,405 reported outbreaks. Now, that part I understand. But among those 13,405 outbreaks, 273,120 case illnesses or cases were associated with those 13,000 outbreaks. But above there, it says 48 million illnesses a year that are foodborne, and 9.1 million are identified. So I don't know how to reconcile these two sets of figures. It kept going down from there. It said of the 273,120 cases of illnesses, 9,109 were hospitalized. And of those hospitalized patients, 200 died. So it means that this includes salmonella and shigella and all those other
E. coli,
bacterial and rotavirus and all these other things. So it means to me that most diarrheal disease outbreaks, if palliative care is given to the patient, they will eventually get better. Now, there are some exceptions. I bet you among those 200 deaths, most of them could be attributable to Salmonella typhi or some more severe form of salmonellosis.
All of those, of course, are summarized on the notifiable diseases summary for 2011.
Correct. So you can throw into this mix now Cyclospora, and it looks as though there may be a trend towards an annual, maybe 100 or 200 cases a year now of this.
So maybe the incidence is increasing?
It's a trend. I can't say for sure.
Let's say it is.
Yeah, okay.
Why would you think it
well,
is?
there are more people. So there are more people to be fed, and therefore the food system is being stressed. And when the food system is stressed, this lowers and relaxes the oversight for safety and freshness, because the urgency to feed people exceeds the ability to inspect food for pathogens.
Right.
So a lot of this is going to fall through the cracks, and the more people there are and the more demand for certain foods there are, the more likely it is there'll be outbreaks, because you'll have to go to more sources, and when you do that, you're sort of overwhelming the system.
Would a vertical farm be susceptible to cyclosporin contamination?
I wasn't even thinking about that, but maybe not, though, because let's assume for the moment that someone has it. Let's maybe make some speculation here. One speculation is that there are carrier states. Okay, so for salmonella, for instance, for other diarrheal disease agents, there are carrier states, and so you obviously can't identify those people unless you actually did a test on their feces to find out if they were infected.
Isn't that going to be a requirement for the vertical farm?
You bet it is. And so if you're careful, and every one of them does that, of course, then you will catch this in its infancy, and you'll prevent
you screen everyone, but that's going to be a privacy thing, right?
But there are some vertical farms up and running right now, and I don't know any of them that would have admitted to doing that.
Would you put people in suits and gloves so that
I
don't contaminate?
I would take the Japanese approach to this, to be honest with you. I really would, because why wouldn't you do that? If you can avoid contamination, you should.
Right.
So if you look at the way the Japanese run their vertical farms, you can see them dressed in caps and gowns and boots and gloves and masks, the whole deal. I mean, they're just trying to isolate themselves from the
So is that how
from the vegetables.
You will run your vertical farm?
If I had one, I'm not sure I would do it that way. I think I would just require an inspection for organisms that you could transmit from person to person via fecal contamination. That's what I would do.
What would you do? Get fecal samples from people?
Yeah, of course.
Really?
Yeah, sure. They used to do that all the time in the New York City restaurant industry. Yeah, and that was a requirement. You had to have 3 stools in a row negative.
For what?
In order to get a job.
Yeah, no, I understand. Negative for what?
A variety of things, but all the things you can identify under a microscope, for instance.
What would they be, Dickson? Could we list those?
We could. That's another prize, Vincent. That's another prize.
That's a good contest.
Sure.
A list of. You're going to give another prize for that
I will give another prize for that.
Parasites detectable in stool.
That could be transmitted immediately from person to person by fecal contamination. This requires no incubation outside. And I'll just give one away for free. I will give one away for free. Giardia. Okay, I'm going to give that one away for free. That's immediately infectious for another person. The moment you encounter the cyst in your oral cavity and swallow it, you can become infected. It requires no outside incubation whatsoever. So that would be one of them that you can identify.
That's like the opposite of the first one.
Exactly. So, and when you detect these, of course, then you are obliged to do one of 2 things. One is you could prevent that person from working in a position that might result in them contaminating the environment. 2, you could treat them.
Right.
And then hire them and teach them proper sanitary facilities.
So you could give them the option. Here are your options. We could treat you with this terribly toxic drug, or we can fire you.
It's not terribly toxic. Stop it.
That'd be some choice, Dickson.
Those are not the choices, Vincent. That's not required. No, most of these drugs are well tolerated.
I know. I'm just being silly just to see.
That's okay.
What you would do.
No, that's okay. That's what I would. In fact, that's what they did do, and that's why these local clinics that specialized in parasitic diseases were so busy during the 50s and 60s in New York City. They were also screening those patients. They weren't patients, they were just potential workers.
Interesting. And this is still done today?
No.
Why?
It's not still done today. Well, I think if you turn a blind eye to the problem and say if there haven't been a recent outbreak in recent years, therefore it's not traceable to anybody in particular, and we need our money for some other things, then we're not going to do this anymore. And so you can, at some level, you can, through a municipal manipulation of the severity of these illnesses, also based on the fact that out of 273,120 people, only 200 died.
Mm-hmm.
You say, well, that's a pretty low percentage. What's the mortality rate, Vincent?
Of what?
200 deaths out of 273,120 cases.
This is not the mortality rate. This is the case fatality rate.
No. Well, these are the number of cases.
These are confirmed.
This is the case cases. Mortality rate. The case mortality rate. That's right. What is the case mortality rate?
Sorry. I just pulled up the wrong. I'm spelling it wrong. So, tell me the numbers again.
I will. It's 273,120 case illnesses and 200 deaths.
200 deaths.
Yeah.
Divided by 273.
Yeah, 120.
Yeah, it's
0.000 something.
0.07%.
So if
that's very low.
Right. So if you're a city councilman,
I see.
And right, and you're confronted with still funding these clinics that do the diagnosis, or to put the money into some other control program, or to maybe sanitize garbage cans, or something else, you could make a pretty good case that the system, it doesn't warrant that oversight.
Right.
Because 0.07% of all the people that get sick are going to die from this thing, and that's so minuscule that you can't really catch them anyway. So, and that's the reason why these clinics are no longer in operation. Too bad.
I'm looking at the New York City Department of Health website.
Yeah.
And I can't find the numbers, but they do have a page on Cyclospora.
Good.
Telling you about it. That's all.
Great. Now, food handlers have to be instructed as to how to conduct themselves in a sanitary fashion when they get jobs. So they have to actually complete a small training session in which they're coached and educated as to what to do. All employees must wash hands before returning to work, that sort of thing.
By the way, at the CDC site, there's a very nice life cycle.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
So we'll have to include that as well.
Sure.
Nice resources that the CDC has
here.
Oh,
they're good. They're very, very good. I'm sure WHO has a similar website in terms of that.
Frequently asked questions.
Yeah. They do a good job.
Okay.
And you know what? Those people are overworked and underpaid. There is no other group that I can think of that does so much for public health and is so little appreciated. And the Centers for Disease Control is one of those places. We underfund it, and we really shouldn't.
Although their budget's going up in 2014.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that.
In fact, I can tell you what was requested.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think, here, I have it right here. I wrote about it. Federal funding for science research.
Excellent.
So the NIH funding request for fiscal year 2014 was $31.3 billion. The CDC request is $6.6 billion, a decrease of $270 million from fiscal years.
Excuse me?
2012.
They went down.
But emerging and zoonotic infectious diseases would get $70 million more.
Right. So that's really rearranging the budget. They still got less.
$1.3 billion for public health preparedness and response, a decrease of $48 million. And that $48 million is a problem because
I know
salaries, supplies,
no kidding,
equipment.
No,
wow,
they deserve a better shakeout.
Let me put a link to that also in our show notes.
I've visited the Centers for Disease Control many times in the past, and I'm sure you have also.
I have never visited.
No, really.
They don't want me there.
Well, the facility could use some revamping. I can tell you, it's a hodgepodge of buildings, and it's got no heart and soul. Like, let's say, for instance, if you went to the NIH in Bethesda, it has some really super beautiful buildings and nice laboratories, etc.
Right.
By comparison, the Centers for Disease Control is living in the 19th century, doing 21st century work. By the way, don't get me wrong;
well.
They do fantastic work. And like I said, they're underappreciated. So anything I can say that might help them along, nothing I would say would ever help them along. But just to let people know that this is the scientific arm of public service through public health. And if we can't support that, then I think that we shouldn't be supporting a lot of other things. Like perhaps building a new atomic weapon that might wipe out half the Earth. That sort of thing. But that's just me talking.
It's what people pay to do.
I know.
Listen to you talk.
No, well, they don't pay.
You want to do some email?
Sure.
You sure we're done with this?
No, we're not done with this yet because we have to solve this problem. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of the. Remember that tie I brought in with the little holes in the shoes?
Yeah, gumshoes.
That's
Detectives, right?
That's right. The EIS officer tie.
Is that an EIS tie?
It is.
That's cool. Yeah, I think I put a picture up somewhere.
Yeah, I have one of those ties. Yeah. They gave me one once.
So what do we have to do? We have to solve this.
You have to find out what the source is, or
Oh.
sources.
I would interview everybody.
Like,
But
for
obviously
instance,
they didn't figure it out, so I don't know.
Do you remember last year we did an outbreak using cantaloupes?
Yes.
And do you remember the organism?
Was it on TWiP?
No.
No, this is salmonella
No.
outbreak or E. coli?
Listeria.
Listeria, right.
Yeah, 33 people died.
That's listeria right there on my desk.
And when you put this in the show notes too.
I have a
It's a toy.
one of these giant microbes of listeria someone
Imagine
sent me.
making a toy out of listeria. Now, that's kind of a perverse toy, don't you think? You wouldn't give that to a baby, would you?
Yeah, I would. That way they get to know what bacteria look like.
Well, they might think it's friendly.
Of course, this has eyes, which is kind of silly.
Yeah, that's kind of silly. At any rate, that was a foodborne illness that could have easily been prevented. By the way, I've seen some update of that, and now the cantaloupe industry has a new method for selling cantaloupes.
What's
It
that?
includes a super wash to
They
get rid
have
of
a
the
bigger,
listeria.
more powerful washing.
They do.
Yeah, washing a cantaloupe is hard because the surface is
That's right.
like corrugated, right?
But it almost put them out of business last year, Vince. They almost lost everything.
And you can't get people sick.
And cantaloupe is good. I mean, everybody likes it, apparently, because they eat a lot
I
of
tell
it.
you, whenever I go somewhere and there's sliced cantaloupes sitting out, I get wary about
Think
it.
twice, right?
Because you don't know
Well,
if they washed it before slicing it
no
through,
kidding,
right?
no kidding. So it almost killed an entire industry, and they make a lot of money from this.
So we're going to follow up on this cyclospora?
Well, yeah, we are, because as soon as they find out where it came from, I'd like to reveal that
Okay.
part of this epidemiological study.
Well, if you're going to be here the rest of the summer, we should do this once a week. That would be awesome.
Hey,
Okay.
what a
Email.
radical idea.
You'll like this first one from Anne.
Uh-oh.
I found TWiP just a week ago, and I feel that I've found a home.
Oh, good.
I'm a pharmacist, usually on the night shift, and I stay excited all night listening to you. Parasites have always been my hobby. In fact, I recently divorced one. His life cycle is unique.
You might say she insisted on it.
I get oddly thrilled when dispensing antiparasitic drugs.
That's funny.
Thought I was odd. Thanks for normalizing me, Annie.
Way to go, Annie.
Isn't that great?
That's wonderful.
Renato writes, hello, dear TWiP hosts. Just in case you are not already exposed to this, I send you the web address for a recently launched worm watching game. It's called wormwatchlab.org. It consists of video feeds of C. elegans,
All right.
which are being recorded automatically by tracking microscopes. As far as I understand it, the researchers want to measure the efficacy of the serotonin-regulated musculature of egg laying for each worm, so recording when the eggs are laid is a vital piece of information.
Inflammation.
This game is from the same guys that spawned Galaxy Zoo, where you classify galaxies, and Planet 4, where you classify terrain formations in Mars. Actually, they have several interesting scientific games, so I'd like to pick their project menu for the week.
Great.
zooniverse.org/projects. Also, there's something I'd like to ask Dickson.
Uh-oh.
In TWiP 56, you and Vincent had a brief discussion about the name TWiP,
We did.
why it uses the word parasitism instead of parasitology.
Huh.
It has occurred to me sometimes that the P in TWiP show name could also mean pathology. Whenever I think that, I wonder if all parasitism is a pathology, not necessarily a human pathology, but some living being's pathology. I then usually imagine that Dickson could argue that not all parasites cause harm to their hosts, and therefore parasitism is not completely within the scope of pathology. Is that the case? Thank you, and all your guests for the shows. The definition of parasite is that it harms the host, right?
Yeah, it derives more from the host than it gives back to the host. That's the definition of parasitism. And so whether the harm is is from an individual or whether it's incremental
Mhm.
is despite it's despite the fact that we want to classify parasites as harmful agents. So remember, our very first TWiP, we talked about a parasite which was not a parasite. Anaerobius formicularis, the pinworm. And the pinworm just lives in your colon and eats E. coli. That's
It's
what
not
it
a
eats.
Parasite, though.
It's not a parasite. But,
It's a symbiont, right?
well, it's a commensal.
It lives with you.
Yeah, it doesn't do
Remind
anything.
me what symbiont is again?
Well, a symbiont is a relationship between two unrelated organisms.
Just a relationship.
Yeah, so it could be mutualistic. They both benefit each other, like a lichen and an algae. You're so fond of pointing that out to me, so I can give it back. Or it could be a parasitism, where the organism derives more
Right.
from the host and it gives back to the host. Or it could be commensal, where there is no obvious benefit garnered by harboring the organism, nor is there a benefit by being in the organism. Not that they can
It's
tell.
neutral?
It's neutral.
Maybe that's just because we haven't figured it out.
Yeah, well, that's right. Most of the argument would say that we just haven't studied it enough to decide what it does.
Right.
So pinworms may or may not be a parasite.
Is he
Well,
correct about pathology?
Well, when you say pathology, it means that there's some real damage done here. And in fact, a lot of the parasites, which I love, are the ones that can either delay or inhibit pathology to allow the parasite to remain intact.
Okay. So then he says, oops, terribly sorry for misspelling your name. He had been spelling it Dixon.
Oh, that's
now
okay.
He corrects it, and he says, I guess I always think of the Dickson from the Mason and Dickson line when I hear your name. By the way, the book by that name by Thomas Pynchon is an awesome read. Well, all Pynchon books are great, but M&D is arguably the best one so far. Ever read any Pynchon?
I've not.
You're missing things.
I've missed a lot, Vince.
You have. You have.
I feel deficient
I'm
in
very
many
sorry.
areas.
Chris writes, on your last TWiP, someone mentioned the Pandemic board game. I stumbled upon a YouTube video of it being played and explained by Will Wheaton, the actor who started out as a teenager on Star Trek and now shows up on various television programs. Apparently, the person who starts is someone who had recently been sick or had the worst disease. It turned out that 3 of the players had caught H1N1 in 2009 at a gaming-type convention in Seattle. Links, so you can understand why they mean PAX. He puts a links to this. But one of them had suffered worse a few years before with a sequence of strep infections. So that spurred them to make this game.
I see.
Enjoy, just like I enjoyed learning about parasites in fish due to transporting them elsewhere.
Aha.
Which would that be, Dickson?
Let me think. Myxobolus cerebralis.
Very good, Chris. And I really hope that my 2 college kids going to that same gaming convention don't get some kind of infection. Yeah, well,
Right.
wash your food.
Hey.
Garen writes, hi all. I have a short bit of trivia to add to TWiP number 56.
Good.
Remember what that one was?
Well, it was one before this.
Yeah. You briefly discussed the topic of fish spawning and the salinity
Yes.
or not of the water in
Yes.
which the fish spawn.
Right.
The question of a salty river was so very briefly brought up and dismissed. Well, there does in fact exist a saltwater river. I have been there, and it is on the island of Okinawa.
Okay.
The river is spring-fed, and the spring is so close to the ocean that the ocean water actually infiltrates the spring, and it flows its extremely short length back to the ocean.
I'll be darned.
It is something like 1 to 2 kilometers long. I have a picture around here somewhere, but I know not where at the moment.
And fish live in this river?
He doesn't say. He just says it's a salty river.
Oh, I see what you mean. I see. Okay.
Would you think fish could live in it, Dickson?
Sure.
That's it? Okay, fine.
Well, wait. There's one of the most unusual associations in nature involves the pupfish.
Yes.
And you say yes, like you know what that is. You know the pupfish?
Pupfish?
Pupfish.
I don't know pupfish.
Okay, pupfish live in small, isolated areas of deserts in very, very hot springs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of those springs are saline.
Okay.
And there's one species of pupfish that lives in Death Valley. which is 100% totally dependent upon its nutritional source from an owl, which catches its prey, swallows it whole, and then comes to roost over the pond that these pupfish are sitting in, and it defecates into the pond and increases the nutrient value of the water, which allows the food for the pupfish to develop.
Huh.
When the owl dies...
This is a food web, right?
No, it's a very short food chain. It's a chain.
It's a chain.
It's like 2 links on this chain. That's the end of it. I saw this on one of the nature shows. I guess it was with maybe George Page or one of the early ones on Channel 13 that I watched. And I was amazed.
Why don't you watch the virus show?
Who said I didn't? How do you know I didn't watch that?
What virus show is there?
Based on my ignorance?
No, there should be one, and we should do it. So people could say, hey, did you see that virus show last night?
Oh, right.
They don't want it. They don't want a show on one topic. They want to be diverse.
Diverse. Well, it's what makes the world go round, Vince.
What?
Diversity.
Well, there are a lot of different viruses, aren't there?
There are. Okay, come read some more.
Okay, sorry. All right, Robin writes. He sends a link to an article called What Genomic Data Tells Us About Life, the Complexity of the Mealybug.
Oh.
This is actually a story we discussed on TWiP number 17. The mealybug, all right, lives on the sap of trees. It just eats sap. So that's not enough to make you grow and prosper, live long,
No.
and all that. So it has bacteria in their gut that provide other things.
Got it.
They take the sap and they provide things. But those bacteria have within them bacteria that provide help to the larger bacteria because they don't have all the genes that they need.
Really?
So it's like a...
Really?
What do you call those eggs, those Russian eggs? That are
the nested
inside one another.
There's not an egg. There's little statues.
Little
dolls. Russian dolls.
So that's what this article is about.
Wow.
It's cool. There's a tail on the frog, on the bump on the branch, on the log, and the hole in the bottom. You know what that's from?
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, so we did that on TWiP, Robin, number 17.
Wow.
Joe writes, Vincent Dickson. Here's a follow-up on your biofuels question. We talked about biofuels. Joe sent us a long letter about the internal combustion engine and how awesome it is.
Okay, sure.
And we were talking about biofuels.
We were.
To make fuels from crops succeed, we need a biotech breakthrough that I really thought someone would have done already. Basically, we need a bug that eats cellulose and converts it back to sugar so you can ferment it. Personally, I think there is a Nobel Prize in it for the group that creates an E. coli strain that converts cellulose to sugars. Once you have that, then you can feed the farm animals the corn and run your tractor on the corn stalks. Or you could use hay or grass clips or wood chips or waste paper, whatever is available cheaply. Until we get that bug, ethanol from corn will just be a niche technology. That's what biofuel is made from, Dickson?
No, there's a lot of other sources. Sugar cane. Brazil uses sugar cane. You can use sugar beets.
Right, but they're all...
You can use switchgrass.
Switchgrass?
Algae. Lots from algae.
There's not a lot of that around, right?
Well, it's all experimental, basically, because they're looking for the ideal source. Right? Algae seems to be in the lead right now, but what I heard at this meeting that I was at in Singapore, although it wasn't about that, I was... sort of hobnobbing around with a bona fide engineer from Arup by the name of Peter Head, and he drives an all-electric car, by the way. And he's convinced that these biofuels are a thing of passing fancy because eventually all the cars will be running on electricity once we learn how to supply cheap electricity. And he says we're not too far away from that.
No, but Joe says the internal combustion engine rules.
That's today.
Well, remember the email, he argued that.
No, I understand.
It's going to be a long time.
It's going to be an argument. And as long as it's an argument, then there'll be competition, and that's good, because then the efficiencies will go up.
All right, let me continue his letter. It's much longer.
I'm sure.
People will keep pushing to use corn crops or other high-sugar crops to make fuel, but the economics are not good and the lost opportunity costs are too high. Look how the modest current efforts in the U.S. have pushed up food prices and still required government subsidies to be competitive. No doubt there is a listener out there with lots of arguments for how great ethanol from corn is, but I don't see anything like the margin needed to make it a viable market-changing crude oil substitute.
I would totally buy into that. Totally. Like, it costs you more carbon to create the corn than it does to get it back for the fuel. It's crazy. But that doesn't argue against using solar panels to split water to make fuel cells, for instance. It doesn't argue against that. And it doesn't argue against cheap electricity if you can find a cheap source, like, for instance, hydropower or something like that, or atomic power.
I will show my age and tell you that as a senior chemical engineering design project in 1980 at Purdue, we looked at how to convert
Great school.
crop waste materials like corn stalks into fuel, and it wasn't pretty.
It's great school.
The only real way to break down the cellulose was to grind it up and treat it with hot fuming sulfuric acid in big reactors. Fuming sulfuric is 98% concentrated acid that is saturated with sulfur trioxide gas. Brute force chemistry for sure. As I remember, you could get pretty good conversion of the cellulose, but the ugly part was separating the good stuff from all the waste acid and the non-reactive lignin.
Sure.
Once you got all the acid out of the good stuff, then you still had to ferment the sugars. It's not surprising that you don't see anybody running this process to make fuel. We need a biotech solution to break down the cellulose without all the mess. I think folks were looking at the microbes in termites' stomach as a place to start, but I've not heard of any progress on this in several years.
Right.
I have to read this on TWiP tomorrow because my two co-hosts will have things to say because you obviously have nothing. I'm just kidding.
Well, by the way, a lot of microbes in the stomach of termites turn out to be protozoans. Ciliated protozoans, as a matter of fact. So they're not just microbes. They're eukaryotic.
And they may be doing something?
And so, yeah, of course they're digesting the cellulose.
I will add that biofuels are not the only option for our fuel supply. For the past 100 years, we have had repeated dramatic reports that we are about to run out of oil, and yet it never seems to happen.
Yeah.
I remember a particularly detailed one in Scientific American about 10 to 15 years ago with beautiful graphs and everything. Each time the trumpets of doom sound, some smart engineer or geologist comes up with a new way to extract more oil.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason why this trend will suddenly stop this time. We still have lots of tar sands, deep oil, and shale oil that have not been touched.
True.
Please note that I am not expressing a political view on the social correctness of these options, just the technical aspects. Even more impressive are the reported quantities of frozen methane hydrate clathrates on the ocean floor that would likely be fairly easy to extract. Some estimates are that there is more than 10 times the amount of energy stored there than in all the oil we have ever used. Obviously, none of these fossil fuels address the CO2 generation concerns that many people have.
Exactly. The other point to make here, too, is the fact that as shale oil is difficult to extract because it requires lots of water and lots of chemical treatment, natural gas from shale is very easy to get just by fracking, and that's going on all over the place right now, right? And it's driving down the price of oil. So I read an article very recently, and I think it was either the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal, that said in another 10 years, the price of oil will be $50 a barrel. Remember when it went over 140?
Well, I think if we can get rid of our dependence on Middle Eastern oil, this would really help.
Yeah, so there's another trend here, Vince, and you know this because I drive one. It's a fraudulent automobile. I drive an electric hybrid.
Yeah, but to make that car, the batteries are ridiculous.
Right.
Energy sinks.
Right.
No good.
But wait. Just wait.
Right.
The moment you can identify the issue, you can address it, and I think they're addressing
it. Well, look, as he said here, there are new ways to get different energy sources.
Absolutely.
You get clever.
You bet.
Wind, solar, hydro, and even nuclear power all have their places, and I hope their niches keep growing as the technology improves, but nothing comes close to competing with chemical energy as a cheap, portable, high-density source of energy. One just needs to look at biology to see the truth of this. Plants fix the sun's energy into chemical forms that then cascade through the food chain, ever evolving into more complex forms. How cool is that? It is great.
Yep.
It all starts with the sun.
Can't argue with that one at all. But it is limited to the energetics of the reactions.
Sure.
You can't exceed that. But everybody wants a car that goes from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
I know.
The only way to do that is to have an electric car. That's what it'll do.
2 seconds?
Well, 4 seconds.
I want a car that has a stick.
I
don't want to drive a car that doesn't have a stick.
There's no clutch. There's no...
I don't want that. I love clutching. I love shifting. I have a 6-speed car.
You know, like
I love
for the
it.
kids' seats, they put a little steering wheel for the kids. We're going to get you a
I am not going to
shifter.
drive an electric car. I will stay home and do my podcast.
Oh, my goodness.
I love shifting. It's the only thing that makes driving tolerable.
Oh, my goodness.
Thanks for helping me stretch my brain each week. Thus ends This Week in Chemical Engineering. Warmest regards, Joe. That was great, Joe.
Yeah, terrific.
Maybe we should do it This Week in Chemical Engineering. I thought we were doing This Week in Sustainable Agriculture.
Why don't we?
I'm waiting.
What are you talking about? You're waiting.
Want to have dinner?
Sure.
Talk about it?
We want to have dinner and talk about it. Let's do that.
You know, you're going to be the death of me.
No.
We have one more.
All right.
Daniel writes, "Dear good doctors, I hope you are well. I became fascinated with parasites at uni when I was studying freshwater and marine biology and took zoology and again relating to shifting global distributions of aquatic infectious organisms by climate change. I loved every aspect of parasitism, but there were such small parts of my course I didn't think I could go into parasitology. I left college and went into aquaculture, listening to you all the while, which nudged me into returning to study.
Oh, good.
I'll be starting a master's in molecular parasitology at Glasgow University next year.
Oh, that's a great place.
I'm certain I wouldn't be if not for you two and TWiP. I cannot express my gratitude in words for your effort and work making TWiP." Wow, that's great.
That is.
I love TWiP et al. I've been following it for years. However, I'm currently working at a remote pearl oyster farm in Australia, Beagle Bay. As the podcast is over 50 megabytes, my iPhone won't download it without a Wi-Fi connection. There is no Wi-Fi. Is there any way you can reduce the podcast file size without reducing the length of the show, of course? File compression or something. It's been months since I've had a TWiP, I guess you mean TWiP, fix, and I'm starting to get the shakes. Warm regards. And he says warm regards. Maybe he meant to say worm regards.
Worm regards, yeah, that's right.
Daniel.
Good.
I can make it smaller. I will do a smaller quality. It'll sound just the same, and we'll keep it below 50
So
megs.
aquaculture is rife with outbreaks of infectious diseases, and many of them are protozoans, and they affect the growth.
We talk about them.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
We do.
Well, whirling disease was one of
There's
those things.
Yeah. Some more.
Cool.
All right. Before we wrap up, do you have anything to say?
Well, I did want to say one thing.
Want me to say it?
No, if you'd like to say it, go for it.
All right. This week, today,
on the 16th.
on the 16th of, what month are we in?
It's
July?
actually the 17th.
Dickson's newest book has gone on sale.
Correct.
It's called People, Parasites, and Plowshares, Learning from Our Body's Most Terrifying Invaders. Did you make that title up? Did you put terrifying in it?
No, I didn't do the second title. The publisher
I didn't
did
think
that.
so. That doesn't sound like you.
No, I didn't like to hyperbolize it, but they did because they have to sell books.
By Dickson D. Despommier. You can buy it at Amazon and other places, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. If you use the link to buy it, it gives a little money to the show.
And by the way, the people
Very little.
with the most correct answers to those two questions that we asked before will be sent, if they, of course, send us their address. They will be sent a signed copy of People, Parasites, and Plowshares. I will offer that now as a prize.
Thank you, Dickson.
You're welcome.
There's some editorial reviews here. Bob Gwads has one, and Carl Zimmer.
Right. Well, they made blurbs, but actually it's been reviewed now by Scientific American, and they gave it a favorable review, and it was reviewed by one other place, Kirkus Reviews, which is a tough review, by the way.
It's here.
Kirkus Books.
Reviews.
They give out tough reviews, and they liked it as well. They said the yuck factor is pretty high. Well, I didn't think it was that high, but so I enjoyed writing it. I mean, you actually helped me write the book, Vince, because yes, you did.
Yeah, we read a chapter of it a long time ago, right?
Yeah, a version of the chapter, not the actual chapter.
The actual. Do you want to read a chapter at some point?
Sure, I'd love
to give people maybe the next TWiP?
I would love to.
Pick a chapter.
I will do that.
And I will sit and listen while you read, and that will be the
Stumble through my own words.
No, you'll be fine. People, Parasites, and Plowshares.
Right.
You guys should go get it.
Ha.
Support Dickson because his clothes are fraying, and he really needs some money. If you like TWiP,
oh dear,
please go over to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review. That helps us. You can find us at iTunes and at microbeworld.org/TWiP. And we love to get your questions and comments. Send them to twip@twiv.tv. Dickson Despommier can be found in Singapore, right? No, you're back from Singapore.
But if I was asked to go back, I would. I was really charmed by that place. For not the obvious reasons either. It had a functional rainforest in the middle of the city, Vince.
Really?
You can walk through it.
Who built this rainforest?
Nobody built
it. It's natural?
They didn't touch it.
Did you go
They built around it. I
it?
was near it. I went to the botanical gardens and watched and went to the orchid exhibits.
It's nice that they preserved it, isn't it?
It is.
How big is it?
It's fairly decent. It's about 3,000 acres.
That's quite large.
It is.
Wow. Impressive.
Yeah, in the middle of a very, very densely populated city.
How many acres is Central Park?
I don't know. I can't remember.
No?
We're going to find out right now.
778 acres. 840, sorry.
Well, this is 3,000.
That's 6% of Manhattan's total acreage.
Yeah.
Isn't it great what you can find?
On the internet. Hopefully that's correct.
Yeah, it might not be correct.
Don't believe everything we read.
Anyway, you can find Dickson at trichinella.org, verticalfarm.com, and medicalecology.com. Thank you for doing this today, Dickson.
You don't have to thank me at all. I love doing these. You know that.
I know you love it.
But thank you for the scaffolding, for the matrix, for the physicality of being able to podcast at will. It's an amazing set of technologies.
Yeah, you need
that
a little
exist.
tech, right?
No,
well, to make it sound good.
No, but Vincent,
you could do it in a crappy way.
I think it's worth saying, and nobody knows this out there, but you just have to realize that all of those beautiful images and the massaging of the data and the putting together of each one of these is done only by Vincent Racaniello. He sits and diligently works on these hard technological interfaces to make this look seamless. And I think we should all be thankful that you're willing to do it. And you also ask penetrating questions, and your humor and your good nature are just a pleasure to work with. So I would never say no to you.
What are you drinking?
Your Kool-Aid.
Very good. Good repartee. I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.ws. The music that you hear at the beginning and end of TWiP is composed and performed by Ronald Jenkins, and I use it with his kind permission. You can find his work at ronaldjenkins.com. You can go buy it. Do it. He'd love to get you to buy his stuff. He gets very excited when people from TWiP buy his music.
He should.
You've been listening to This Week in Parasitism. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon. Another TWiP
is parasitic.